This is Trepp Wire Week in Review for week ending November 27th. I'm Martha Kocher with Trepp, a data modeling and analytics firm for the CMBS commercial real estate and CLO markets. I'm with Manus Clancy, Senior Managing Director, and Joe McBride, Head of CRE Finance. This week, Janet Yellen gets the bid for Treasury Secretary in the Biden administration. AstraZeneca announces positive results for its vaccine trial, giving investors another reason to be bullish, and essentially ignores some of the mixed economic news. Manufacturing growth slowed in central Atlantic states. Consumer confidence this month is the lowest since August. Despite this, the National Retail Federation expects 2020 holiday sales growth to be on par with previous years. Manus, market sentiment is clearly being fueled by vaccine optimism and some relief that the presidential transition has begun in earnest.
I think it's certainly true. We had 3 weeks in a row of great vaccine news. As you mentioned before, every Monday it seems like somebody else is getting ahead of this. The latest one, not only was it almost as successful as the first two, but it was also said to be going to be offered cheaper than the other alternatives. So we will now have 3 different vaccines to choose from. Put me down for all 3. I will not hedge my bets. I will hedge my bets. Also, at least one of the 3 will be really effective. Hopefully they'll be
297% effective.
I'm hoping that there'll be some favorable side effects, like the elimination of lower back pain, or maybe some uptick in my first step. That
in your ups, maybe.
Everybody's talking about the they always talk about the downside risks and the side effects. How come these things never have the upside side effect?
Better vision.
Like your 40
thicker
time
hair.
Your 40 time gets to be 4.4, right? You're talking about going to the combine and doing the shuttle run. I want the 3 vaccines. I want to take them all. I want hotels to open. I want malls to open. I want them to rethink this whole Philadelphia nonsense about not selling alcohol on Wednesday night. And I want my 40-yard time to go to be 4.4. How's that?
It's a good one. It's a good list.
Going back to the optimism, the vaccine is a big part of it. I think that people were quite relieved that Janet Yellen was the choice for Treasury Secretary. She has done this before. I think people were concerned that it might be somebody like Elizabeth Warren, who might really kind of push the envelope on progressive initiatives. I think that this kind of lends itself to more of a lighter touch, if you will, for banks and the rest of the economy, maybe a more cooperative view when it comes to talking to Congress and the White House about things. So I think that's a positive sign. And I think that, I think we have a light at the end of the tunnel now. I think people can say, by April, maybe some of these really hard hit parts of the economy, like restaurants and airlines and hotels, can really start getting back to normal. So all of that together really makes it a quite interesting and nice narrative going into the holidays.
Well, what do they say? It's always darkest before the dawn. I do feel like there is a notable or observable shift in the vibe. I'm doing my own vibe check here. I think that the fact that cities are looking to shut down again, the fact that the numbers are increasing, I think more and more people are just starting to see people they know actually get COVID. And so there's definitely where I think we thought we were coming out of this and we thought we were reopening and things were getting better COVID wise. And now we're kind of having that maybe beginning of a little bit of a second wave. But I do think that even if there is one, you're right, by January, hopefully the elderly or the more at-risk people will be able to get emergency use of the vaccine. And hopefully a couple months later, everyone can.
I have to say, on the negative side, the thing that's killing me this week is how terrible Thanksgiving is going to be this year for people. Not seeing their relatives, in many cases, not seeing their friends coming home from college, not having their traditions. This may not be an exaggeration that 90 of my favorite 100 days in my life. Well, I haven't had 90 Thanksgivings, but 55 of my 65 greatest days of my life were the 24 hours from 5 p.m. on Thanksgiving Eve till 5 p.m. on Thanksgiving. When you were a kid, it was the touch football on the lawn with your cousins and the knee football in the basement. We were kings back then, right? When you're like in your 20s and, early 20s, late 20s, it's, seeing all your friends come home, meeting them at the bar, more touch football Thursday morning, catching up with everybody. And then when you get older, like I am, and you have kids of your own, it's seeing them come home and bring their friends into the house and, having a big dinner with them. It is just the greatest 24 hours, aside from the fact that it's usually lousy football. But everything else about it is makes it the greatest holiday. And the fact that, people are going to be, not together on this holiday really breaks my heart. It is such a part of who we are, the fabric of our country. To think of, older people not getting together with their kids and grandkids is quite sad for me.
So I tend to agree that Thanksgiving is my favorite holiday. And because of everything that you just said, also because of the traditions that I've had in my family growing up. And this will be the first year that we're not doing what we've always done. Now, to take it a little bit in a lighter direction, or maybe not lighter if you're a turkey, but my sense is that this year, my prediction is that there will be way, way more turkeys sold than in years past, right? That has to be the case, because there's going to be, instead of having the average Thanksgiving get together of 15 or 20 people, the average Thanksgiving get together is like 3 or 4 people, and they're all getting turkeys. So I got to think I'd be long the turkey industry right now.
I just hope it's not that, oven gold stuff from Boar's Head that you're getting, throwing that on a slab of rye bread with some Swiss cheese and mustard.
Some cranberry sauce out of the can.
I hope people dig deep and cook the real bird and are not really short arming the whole thing. But it's, going back to the Philadelphia news, perhaps you saw it today that they're banning alcohol sales in restaurants and bars from 5 p.m. Wednesday until I think 8 a.m. Thursday, which is absurd because what bars open at 8 a.m. on Thursday, right? It's really at least a 24-hour ban for these guys. And if I'm a restaurant owner, I'm thinking heading into this, at least we have Thanksgiving. We have all these people coming home. They're all kids. Kids are generally more immune to this stuff. They're still going to go out. They're still going to want to see their friends. It's like Black Wednesday before Black Thursday. It's a Black Wednesday for restaurant owners. And then boom, right? You're just kind of shot down by the Secretary of State or whomever made this edict. And there's another, hole you have to fill in your revenue side. Thumbs down for that move.
We have to move on. I could talk about this all day. I have all sorts of Thanksgiving Eve stories that are both suitable and not suitable for this podcast.
Yeah, tell them about the time you did time.
Nice.
You got pinched.
Let's not. Manus, we're preparing the delinquency report for next week. We've got about 90% reporting at this point. What does it look like for the month of November?
Well, it is leveling off. For those that don't recall our past reports, what we saw was huge spikes in May and June when hotels and retail properties really started to spike. We started seeing a steady decline starting in July, August, September, October. All saw declines of 55 to about 75 basis points in the rate, bringing it down from 10.3 to 8.25% over that period of time. We said there was a very high likelihood that at this point, we could see a leveling off or even an increase going forward. The thesis for us was that a lot of this reduction in delinquency rate was a function of forbearances in the hotel market, relief being granted, and to a lesser degree in the retail space. And those would come off and these loans would start becoming delinquent once again. We started to see some of that this month. So the delinquency rate has not moved very much overall. What we saw was a leveling off in addition to the overall rate of the retail rate. That rate had been falling precipitously for several months. That looks to be about flat for November. We did see an uptick in the lodging rate, which goes to show that as this relief falls off, these loans will revert to being delinquent once again. In the special servicing area, that too was about flat month over month, a slight uptick in lodging, a slight downtick in retail. The one last point I would add about this is that on the topic of delinquencies, we said that we thought that we had hit terminal delinquency velocity early in the summer. We said at that point that if you didn't have to go delinquent through about July, the chances of you going delinquent in August, September, October were probably limited. So we said that we thought that the delinquency rate would not go all that much higher than it had been at its peak in June. Now, what we're going to call this part of the market right now in the lodging space is probably peak special servicing and watch list numbers in aggregate for the lodging market. The thought being that if you've come this far, if you haven't thrown in the towel and turned your keys back, the fact that now you have a finite period of time before the vaccine kicks in and we start seeing travel pick up and business junkets emerge once again, that will keep people in the game reaching into their pocket or tapping their reserves just long enough to get back to when the recovery starts.
So Manish, you mentioned travel resuming. We've seen in the past week that air travel has had a little bit of a bump. We've had approximately 1 million travelers going through airports in the last few days. And normally that's a good sign for hotels, but probably not this week.
Well, I think we were expecting a bump, right? It is Thanksgiving. Not everybody was going to abide by the don't travel edicts. So people were going to do this, even if it wasn't easy. So getting a bump was part of what we would all have expected. I think when the final numbers come in, I think it'll probably be a fraction of what it has been in past years. Whatever we see is probably inflated by kids going home for good. It's not a case where they'll go home for Thanksgiving and come back to school for December. So it's kind of a one-way trip that won't be completed until January. So I think while this gives some of the airlines, a little bit of a bump right now, I do think that this is nothing more than that, like a little blip. I think we go back to business as usual next week. I don't think we're going to see a lot of holiday travel, for leisure purposes, people going to New York or Hawaii or Orlando during Christmas week. So I think it's still a real slog for that part of the industry.
Yeah, we see Keegan mentioned it earlier today, and I've heard from a couple other people who are in the city, in New York City, that the lines for the urgent cares where you can get a COVID test are absolutely bonkers. And they have been for a while now, for probably a week or so. I think that's a leading indicator of a lot of these younger people getting tested before going back home for Thanksgiving, whether that's flying or not. So, but yeah, there's no way, like who would want to go to New York City right now, or any of these other cities where Keegan lives.
I think there was an uptick after our last podcast of people flocking to the city to see that miserable tree. The one that you
see
defended,
the owl
Joe.
in the tree.
It was the owl and extensions, right?
I haven't seen it since they, got it all set up. I've only seen like the bad pictures. It's kind of like,
The before.
you can always, that's the before picture. I want to see the after picture.
And we had some first-time delinquencies that we'll be writing about as well.
Yeah, there's some interesting stories coming out of our Trepp Wire franchise over the next couple days. The biggest one was that the $209 million Northridge Fashion Center loan became delinquent for the first time this month. The collateral contains about 650,000 square feet of retail space in Northridge, California. A few months ago, the borrower had been granted relief which allowed it to utilize reserve funds to cover debt service payments. The reserve was supposed to cover the period from April 2020 to December 2020. Yet this month, the loan went 30 days delinquent. So either the reserve funds have run out or something else is happening that we can't really divine at this point. The loan is split between two CMBS deals. This is $133 million piece and a $76 million piece. Both are in CMBX 6. One makes up almost 15% of a 2012 deal, and another makes up 8.3% of a different 2012 deal. So that's an awful lot of exposure, which there had been a lot of hopefulness, I suppose, on the asset, given the fact that there had been relief and the loan had stayed current. Now it becomes more of a wait and see head scratcher to see what becomes of this. The good news is that for H1 2020, the loan posted a debt service coverage ratio of 1.4x, which was pretty good when everything else is kind of sinking around you, given the COVID closures, and occupancy was 92%. So we're going to stay tuned on that one. There's a second one, a Mississippi mall that also went delinquent for the first time. It makes up about 6.5% of a CMBX 8 deal. It's a Tupelo, Mississippi property, and look for that story to come out in the next couple days.
So we'll be putting out the delinquency report early next week. If you do not get that, you should reach out to us on Trepp.com to get the full report. We also will have a number of Trepwire stories that are pointing to some dramatic shifts in occupancy.
Yes, this is a follow-up on, a thesis or a concern that we've had for quite a while, and that is that multifamily would hold up quite well in the beginning of the pandemic, but may start to see cracks as time went on. As you saw occupancy sag, we were particularly concerned about 24-hour cities and high-end multifamily product. And what we started to see this month for the first time was some indications either in service or watch list notes or in the raw data itself of sagging of occupancy levels at some pretty big high-end properties. So over the next couple of days, we're going to be talking about the New York by Gary. It's a $550 million loan. Its occupancy through Q3 2020 has fallen about 25%. The property is a 76-story tower. It's a very interesting design. If you drive by the lower Manhattan building, it looks like the building itself is wrinkled, and it was meant to be that way. It has kind of a wave in it, making it look like either the building was shocked by an earthquake or that it needs to be pressed. The building also has an elementary school on the first 5 floors and so forth, but it was 98% occupied in 2019. As of end of Q3, it was 74% occupied. So this is the kind of trend that we're looking for in the new financial data that comes out every month. We'll also be writing in the next couple of days about a Fort Worth property that saw a kind of similar trend, even more severe.
So with the Wavy building, the New York by Gary, I think
We
it's
should
Geary.
know because he's a famous architect.
He's a famous architect. I think it's Geary. You can correct us on podcast@trepp.com. The 74%.
This is like saying Muhammad Ali. Like if we were going to talk about boxing, we said, you remember that guy, Muhammad Ali?
Muhammad Ali.
Right. People right away know that, you don't know the first thing about boxing. Right. So this is kind of confirmation that we know absolutely nothing about architecture.
We know about debt. All right. Not debt, but debt. All right. I put the B in subtle. The building is, you said it's 74% occupied, but it has a 1.84x debt service coverage ratio. Right. So I'm thinking, and I didn't look into this, and maybe I should, but there's probably more debt on this property that's not in CMBS. So the kind of, and this is not confirmed, I'm just saying probably. So the kind of all-in debt service coverage ratio is probably not as high as 1.84x on an occupancy of 74%. So, but it's also only on the watch list. It's not in special servicing or anything like that, which would indicate potential defaults. So, but that's usually how these types of deals are structured. Especially this one is a single asset deal, where it's just one large loan securitized and tranched out to bond investors. There's usually the senior, CMBS loan, and then there are junior loans or mezzanine notes, things like that, to add debt onto the capital stack.
Manus, you were talking about multifamily a minute ago, and apparently they could be facing a potential cliff as far as a loss of jobless benefits, which may increase the already 18 million Americans who are behind in their rent payments. So what do we expect to see there in the next few months?
Well, I think that on the other side of all the optimistic news that we saw, right, the transition, the vaccine, the hiring of Janet Yellen instead of somebody more progressive, right, that has to be tempered with the other side, which is the fact that I don't think that this mega stimulus is forthcoming, right? I think that people who think that the $3.4 billion package that has been touted by Nancy Pelosi and others is a sure thing, or is even, kind of the odds-on favorite, I think will be sorely disappointed. I do think that we're going to be on the lower end, right? Somewhere between 500 billion and a trillion when things are said and done, which of course isn't chicken scratch or chicken feed, right? That's real money. And if it goes into people's pockets to pay rent and food bills, that's a real relief. But to the extent that people are counting on something bigger, I think that I don't think there's a there.
As part of the CARES Act, there was also benefits to sole proprietors and small businesses. And I think that's going to also expiring at the end of the year, right? So it's not only the jobless claims, but there was that other element of it.
Well, the one thing we haven't talked about, which I'm going to hijack the outline at this point, is, and this is kind of much more germane to our business, is that Treasury Secretary Mnuchin announced that the Treasury was going to let lapse the Main Street lending program and others at year end when they were slated to expire. They were originally supposed to expire September 30th. They were extended. He said he was ready to let them end. But the big one for our market is the TALF program, right? That Mnuchin said, we're going to let that sunset as well. Now, of course, the new administration could come in and support that anew and reinstitute bond buying. But nobody should lose sight of the fact that the huge rally in spreads that we saw in 2009 and 2010 and the impressive tightening that we saw after the middle of May corresponded really, really closely with the reinitiation of TALF, right? The second one, right? The rally we saw this year. And what we saw was AAA spreads, come down from 350 over the curve to 85 over now, right? We're kind of close to our pre-COVID levels. And then, on the triple B side, we probably went from 1200 over for some weaker credits back to, 450 for weaker credits and maybe 350 for good credits. So, to the extent that this evaporates, this could set the market widening again, right? We've never seen this type of program just kind of have the rug pulled out from under it. And it is worth watching, especially for those warehouse operators that are kind of trying to hedge their books and managing risk in between securitizations.
Well, I would, from everything I've seen, and I haven't looked at it in a while, but at least in our market, I think TALF was mostly psychological. I don't think they really ended up purchasing too much in the way of CMBS. However, knowing that it's there, knowing that the backstop is there was, I think, enough to send the private market back in to buying mode. So knowing that it's not there might put them into selling mode.
Yeah, I mean, it's a time to certainly keep an eye on this and what it does to the psychology of the market, right? We're in a pretty good spot right now, spreads wise, for originators, right? They can really do very well given the stability of the market in multifamily, industrial, office, probably grocery anchored retail and self-storage, right? Warehouse, that type of thing. So it is pretty good. And when we find our market isn't good and goes sideways is when there's a lot of spread volatility. And if this move increases that, it's not a happy place to be if that volatility gets extreme.
Last week, we talked about hotels at some length and their need for some kind of relief, but there are options for distressed hoteliers that we're seeing in the news lately.
Yeah, so we'll give our friend Beth Matson-Teague a shout out. She writes for National Real Estate Investor, and she had an article yesterday about Turnbull Capital Group and just the general market for distressed lending or distressed preferred equity investing and so on. And I just found it caught my eye because the concept was that at least these guys were putting together or have put together a large fund that is going to invest in mostly preferred equity for lodging operators, right? Hotel operators. And that is kind of exactly what the HOPE Act was hoping to do, which we talked about a lot early on in the podcast. And these are, the concept is we can come in, give you some cash to get through the next, 1 to 2 years. You don't have to, it's not like a loan where you have to pay principal and interest or just interest. It's equity with a preferred return, which has to be paid back when the borrower gets through, whatever troubles they're getting through and they sell the property or they go and they refinance and take money out and pay back the preferred equity holders. There were some other things in the article. Go check it out. Again, NREI, Beth Matson-Teague, Turnbull Capital. They said they had something like 20 plus billion in dry powder that it aims at, that it's planning to aim at investment opportunities in distressed assets. So the other part of this article, which we've been talking about a lot, is that there are tons and tons of investors looking to capitalize on distress, but there's not enough distress for them to capitalize on right now. So, we'll see if that, I think, honestly, again, psychological, right? It's just like TALF. Knowing that there's these billions of dollars on the sidelines waiting to jump in means that prices don't drop as much as if we knew there was no money to come to the rescue.
It is interesting. We've mentioned this on a couple of podcasts that when you watch some of these Real Insight auctions or these 10X auctions, when rubber really is forced to meet the road, you do see some pretty nasty outcomes though, right? We saw that with the Burnsville property and we saw that with the Buffalo Niagara Hotel, right? Where the bids came in shockingly low. So let's keep it on the psychological side. Let's keep it away from real facts.
Looking at retail, the International Council of Shopping Centers is a trade organization for obviously shopping centers. They predict that 85% of consumers expect to shop in the period beginning Thanksgiving and ending Cyber Monday. And they're probably going to spend on average about $470. So even though there aren't many stores that are going to be open on Thanksgiving Day this year, it looks like people will do their share to spend money.
Well, it'll be interesting to see what the new it item is for this year, right? The go-to things, historically when you were completely bulletless when it came to imagination, right? There was always the scarf or the sweater or the tie, right? Mittens or something like that. Now nobody leaves their home, right? What do you maybe get somebody a telescope, right? You can look at your
or
your
binoculars if you want to be creepy about it,
or a couch if you're Joe,
right?
Or
if you have a nice like skylight in your bedroom, you could kind of point the telescope out there and kind of fill your time looking at the I don't have any ideas. Like, what would you give? You can't give them a gift certificate for a nice restaurant, right? You can't, give them plane tickets anywhere, right?
That's why Peloton can't make bikes fast enough.
No,
Tickets for a game, right? It's just,
an appliance.
and in Philadelphia, you can't even get them a nice bottle of wine.
So you, so you're saying, Coach, that it's starting Wednesday?
Beginning Thanksgiving.
Well, I can assure you, Coach, that it started a lot earlier than that for me. We actually just moved into a new house last week. So you know how they say, one of the biggest drivers of consumer demand is moving and moving into new places or buying houses or whatever. I can 100% back that up. I can tell you that my Amazon recent orders and tracking page is a multi-scroll type page. It's a like 3 or 4 flicks of the scroll button on the mouse. I can just imagine the UPS guy in my new neighborhood saying, "Oh, here's another sucker." And I have a couple of anecdotes about that. So we actually went to Ashley Furniture, no free ads, but they were very cool. And I was speaking with the person who was helping us out, and I said, "How's business?" And she said they're up 40% since last year compared to the same time last year. So then I went and yesterday I actually went to the appliance store, and I didn't go to Home Depot or Lowe's or anything because I wanted a local person. And I said, I was in and out. I had about 30 minutes between meetings. I had to go and do something. I said, "Hey, guy, I need a top loading dish or washing machine." And he walks me over. It's a huge showroom, right? Probably 50 washing machines and 100 stoves and everything else. And he goes, he walks over and he points to one of these GE ones and says, "This is the one that we can get to you within 2 weeks. The rest of them are on back order, and it could take several months." So that's kind of how wild the consumer demand is for in-home things, right? So the Peloton, the washing machine, the indoor knee basketball set for your kid, like that type of stuff is flying off the shelves.
I remember one soul-crushing day for me when we bought a home was my wife telling me that she had saved us a couple $1,000s on the appliances by shopping around. And I was very much the Price is Right guy. When you see the refrigerator go or the washing machine and they tell you what the retail price is, that, you can get a washing machine for $399 or a refrigerator for $499. When she said we were saving several $1,000s on appliances, my heart sunk. I was like, what? How much appliances really cost? Like, is Drew Carey lying to me? Is Bob Barker not telling me the truth? But Joe confided in us before the call that he's become a master breaker down of boxes. Why don't you tell us about that?
Well, today, Tuesday, was the first day in my new house of recyclables and trash. And as a new, suburban guy, I don't want the recycle guys to get pissed off at me, right? So I spent last night breaking down boxes, and I think I got about 150 boxes in about a 5 cubic foot area, taped up, folded up, just beautiful. Put it right next to the garbage can, put it right next to the recyclable. I actually this morning, I thought I heard an audible round of applause from the recyclable guys. It was my masterpiece.
Just as an aside, like a $50 tip goes a long way towards removing any animosity the recycling guy has that you may create, just for future references. But I think you should use your cardboard breaking down idea and turn it into a new competition, like a new reality show. There's so many of these things right now,
It's the next version of unboxing. It's literally unboxing.
Right. There you go. I think there's, men up and down the age scale that probably have mastered this.
Let's just put it this way. I have been walking around with a box cutter in my pocket for a week, and I don't think I'm going to stop. I think I'm going to just keep it in there because it makes me feel like a real true suburban dad.
So one of the things we've talked about a few times is the fact that tech titans are driving the need for commercial real estate, and in fact are becoming the 21st century real estate moguls, right?
So another friend of ours, Conrad, in the Wall Street Journal, it actually came out today, this morning. He put together a nice article talking about the large tech companies' effect on commercial real estate. And we've been talking about it for a while in terms of these companies taking up space in office buildings, right? Especially in New York and San Francisco, places that have been struggling with COVID. They've seemingly have been taking advantage of, I wouldn't say depressed rental prices, but just, their epic amounts of cash. And what I found really interesting about this article was that it didn't only talk about that, it also talked about how much real estate these companies also own. So there's a great graph here which shows Alphabet, aka Google, owns $39.87 billion worth of real estate. Amazon, 39.22. That's more than Simon Property Group, Prologis, Equity Residential, Boston Properties, and probably a lot of other REITs where it's their business to own real estate, right? Facebook is there at 12 billion, and Apple is there at almost 18 billion. So there is this concept, especially at Amazon, but Google as well, that while they're helping you run your searches or your emails or helping you buy that those uninspired gloves or scarves for your wife online, they're also basically running a family office or a REIT or however you want to call it, a large investment fund with all of this extra cash that they have. I think the point of the story was that the tide of more than just the S&P 500 goes with these large tech companies, right? So if we have a crack in the armor at Google or Amazon, or there's some antitrust stuff that comes down on one of these players, it's not only going to hurt everybody's 401ks because, they make up such a huge portion of most index funds, but it's also could potentially hurt commercial real estate prices, both on the tenant side and on the owner side.
Manus, we had a couple deals of the week.
Well, the big one we'll talk about, I felt obligated to do this one because we talked a little bit earlier about concerns in the multifamily space in 24-hour cities, occupancy falling and so forth. So I wanted to offer up the other side of the coin, which is that there's still great demand and properties are still trading even in markets where people aren't sure how fast they will come back. So the first one is, it appeared in Multi-Housing News. Jeff Steele wrote this piece, One Union Square South, a 239-unit luxury rental property sold for $211 million. The seller was Related Company. Related will stay on and manage the asset. The buyer is MKF Realty. Doug Harmon of Cushman repped Related. Helen Huang and Rael Jarius, I hope I've written this down correct, repped MKF. Wells supplied the financing via a Fannie Mae loan. And it also did, this particular property, bring back some good memories for me. It was at a location near NYU that was about a block from the old Palladium, which was first it was a great concert hall. It hosted the likes of the Allman Brothers, the band, Iggy Pop, Genesis. Bruce Springsteen did several nights there, often confused with the Fillmore East, which it wasn't. It was a couple blocks away from that. Later became a nightclub that was run by Ian Schrager and Steve Rubel. So this particular sale kind of brought back some memories for me. The other was, because we always like to talk about retail properties because it's such a heavily hit area. This one comes from shoppingcenterbusiness.com. It's a website that I go to frequently. It gives a sense of what's happening in the equity market in retail. Their story, Cushman and Wakefield brokered the sale of the Village Shops at Sherrills Ford. It is a 60,000 square foot property in North Carolina in Sherrills Ford, anchored by a Publix. Wagner Property Group was the seller. Other tenants of the property include a Hardee's, a Pizza Hut, Great Clips, and a nail salon. Fane Hicks, Margaret Jones, and Lane Breedlove of Cushman worked on the transaction. They were the brokers for that. And I like this one. On the one hand, it has grocery anchored, which has held up very well, and there's demand for that through and through right now. But it also has a whole lot of other things that probably were hard hit by the pandemic. A haircutting place, a nail salon, a Pizza Hut. So great to see this deal get done and still be an active market for retail across the U.S.
So we have a number of shout outs this week. Bob C. sent us some predictions. You'll recall we asked our listeners to send predictions of the coming year and also give us an assessment of the good, bad, and the ugly of 2020. So he sent us some of those. He also was bummed because he found out that he's a year older than you, Manus, and he felt that you were always older. So not sure how you should take that.
And after I take these 3 vaccines, he's going to be slower.
It's probably true. And, as if Manus were picking on you, I don't know, Steel City Dave commented that it might be time for a wardrobe refresh. He listened last week to your attire.
The train has left the station
I don't know.
many years ago.
I changed my behavior this morning. I put on a old Stone Pony long sleeve black t-shirt, and I noticed there was a rip in the chest that was kind of about the size of a $50. And after about 15 minutes of mulling it over, I took it off and said, I really probably shouldn't go outside with this thing on. I should.
Wow, progress.
There is progress.
Oh my gosh.
That's
And
very
threw on
sad,
my
though,
old-
when you have a like a really old t-shirt that you've had for 100 years, like my 5-star basketball camp t-shirt that has 10 holes in it. I can't get rid of that. There's too many
No.
memories.
You have to
Yeah.
sunset it. And we had Jack B in DC, who's a client and a fan of the podcast. And Manus, I know you had a couple shout outs.
So yes, we had. I'm going to give these people pseudonyms because they wanted to remain anonymous. So we'll call them Miss Black and Miss Me. They came back and said they wanted to weigh in on the Jeopardy idea from last week. I threw out Trish Hall as somebody who was a founder of our market, a founder of the reporting package, the transparency steps, and has been in this market for a long time, is responsible for so much of what we've done as an industry. I said that she would be great at Jeopardy when they did CMBS week, which I'm sure is forthcoming. So these two people were almost unanimous in their throwing out of other names that they thought would be equally worthy of being on CMBS week for Jeopardy, in addition to being great founders of the industry. Kathleen Olin, Grace Holst, Brad Hauger, and Dan Olson. These two listeners gave us big props for those 4 and said if we could ever get, the 5 of them together, maybe with Joe as a 6th or Keegan, we'd have 2 just incredibly interesting Jeopardy episodes.
I'd be like, the Generals when the Globetrotters are playing. The Globetrotters have someone to play. I would be the Generals, just getting
Shell.
absolutely dunked on by these people.
Well, you know what? Even if that's happened, you still get to go home with the play at home version of Jeopardy.
Sure.
You still get that, consolation prize. Nobody goes home empty handed.
I get the $200 or the $100 for coming in third.
No, you just get the play at home game.
The Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade will not be a parade as it's been known historically, with only about 1,000 people taking part and the viewing via broadcast. So, yeah, you'll be watching it on TV like you always do, but it'll be a little bit different. So in the spirit of Thanksgiving, we thought we'd take a moment and share what we personally are thankful for. And we're going to invite Keegan to come out from behind the booth to share his thoughts.
All right. Well, obviously, I'm thankful for family, friends, and their health. That goes without saying. But going back to some of Joe's comments earlier, I'm very thankful for high quality box cutters. I wasn't really aware of all the innovation in box cutter technology. Rather than just the steel utility knife, spend a few extra dollars. You've got new shapes, sizes, handles, grips. And I will challenge anyone to a contest of breaking down boxes. I'm like Usain Bolt when it comes to breaking down Amazon boxes. And I'm thankful for podcasts. You know, I can listen to the brilliant minds of commercial real estate and structured finance while I'm walking my dog, driving, going for a bike ride, breaking down boxes. So it's a great medium. Subscribe today on your favorite provider.
That's the gift. Forget the scarf, forget the sweater, forget anything. Get the podcast. Send it to all your friends.
Subscribe to the podcast for your significant other.
Oh, what a great gift. Wow. Joe.
Well, I'll go next because I know Manus wants to be the anchor here. So I would say a couple of serious ones. So, you know, being able to work for a company that allows us to continue to operate and operate well, and still, you know, get paid. There's a ton of people out there who are struggling at this time because of what's going on. And we are very, very lucky to be in a company that can work from home. I think that we sometimes take for granted that type of thing. So it's always good to remember that. The other one is being able to spend time at home, right? So my son was basically just turned 1 when all of this stuff started, and now he's about to turn 2, and I've gotten to watch the whole thing, right? I've gotten to see him learn how to walk. I've gotten to see him learn how to talk, learn how to scratch and bite and punch and wrestle and all that type of stuff. So we also have one coming in about 3 weeks. So
Ooh.
God willing, we can get through the next 3 weeks with no COVID incidents and bring home the new one. We'll see, boy or girl. Actually, we should have a pool of podcast listeners to see if it's a boy or a girl. We don't know. We're doing the old-fashioned gender reveal.
Which means find out that day of.
Find out, right, with your eyes.
I get it.
And the last one is I won't have to share the dark meat on Thanksgiving Day. A lot fewer people that I have to share with. So that's good.
So mine's a little on the existential side. So allow me to indulge my story. I went for a walk last Saturday with my dogs. You've heard them on this podcast, I believe. And it was a beautiful day in November, 60 degrees in New Jersey, which is something already to be thankful for. And there was a girl on the lawn just playing by herself, twirling, dancing, singing out loud, looked like she was having the time of her life. And I kind of stopped for a minute and looked at her. And I thought, you know, as a counterpoint to the thought that a lot of people will be alone for Thanksgiving, here's someone who's just happy to be. So I thought about that, and I thought that's something I got to keep in mind, just being happy to be.
I thought when you said existential, it was going to be some sort of alien thing. All right, no. Manus, you're up.
I will go with, Martha said we should have one that's tongue in cheek and one that's heartfelt. All I do is tongue in cheek, I suppose. So I decided to pass on that one. I didn't have tongue in cheek, although I'm definitely not a dark meat guy. So just, I don't even get that whole part of it. I'm a white meat guy. But anyway, my thought is that, when you cut away the noise from social media, social media would have us believe that we are a country of reprobates, right? But I think we're a country of 330 million people that really dig deep when times are tough, and you don't hear about these people on social media or on Twitter or other things. So I'm just going to rattle off 6 of what could be 60 types of things that I'm grateful for. Those employers that kept staff in place at great personal expense and financial risk, during this pandemic, those that could have easily shut things down and just kind of dug deep. Those that kept our food banks full so that those that didn't have could have something. Those that kept our grocery stores fully stocked. Those that were when they finally were able to go get a haircut, paid for two, so that the guy who wasn't cutting hair for 90 days, was made whole. Those that were generous with their tips for restaurant workers and delivery people, those responsible for childcare or for elderly care, especially those who themselves were older and put themselves at risk to take care of other people and other people's children. Some nurses that I know that not only did they do their job which was incredibly high risk from the beginning, they would also set up Zoom calls so that these people that were suffering or dying didn't have to die alone. So that's what I have. I love this country, and I'm grateful for all the 330 million people that have made it what it is.
With that, we will close. Thank you to our producer, Keegan St. Ange. Join us next week as we look at what's happened during the week and how it may be impacting you. If you have a question or just a comment or something you're thankful for, send us an email at podcast@trepp.com. For more information, visit trepp.com and subscribe to the podcast with your favorite provider. Thank you for listening and stay well.
All right.